G'day, I'm Ray Tomes from New Zealand. I'm going to talk to you today about economic cycles and the financial crisis. It seems strange to me, the idea that economists and governments would know how to get us out of a financial crisis if they didn't know they were getting us into one. After all, surely the mechanism for staying out of a crisis is easier than getting out of one. One of the biggest crises in history was the one in the 1930s. A fellow named Edward Dewey was an economist and was hired by the President of the United States to study what caused this crisis. And so the first thing he did, he went and interviewed all the economists. He said he got a different answer from every single one. He said there was one of them that he believed was telling him the truth. He was the one who said, "Edward, we really don't know." So I think this is the same situation now, that they really don't know. Now, Edward Dewey made it his life's work to find out why these things happened, and he found that there are cycles in many things, and that what had happened in 1929 is that many cycles that could be identified in the historic data before that time all came together in a down phase at the same time, so that when these cycles were added together there was a huge crash. Now, that's easy to do after the event, but taking Edward Dewey's work, which he formed the foundation for the study of cycles in the early 1940s, and he worked through to the 1970s. In the 1960s he published a whole set of graphs and cycles information on the cycles in the US stock market. In the 1985 or 86, I calculated my own cycles and worked out that there was going to be a crash in 1987. After that, I found Dewey's cycles a couple of years after that were done in the 1960s, and I extended them forward. I ran the cycles forward and added all the cycles up, and sure enough, in 1987 a whole group of cycles came together again and caused the October 1987 share crash. So these things are predictable, and Dewey's data was so good that it could have been predicted in the 1960s. Now, what causes cycles? Cycles come about because something gets a little bit out of kilter one way, and then there's a correcting force that brings it back. But it doesn't just bring it back, it brings it back with a bit of extra momentum so that it overshoots the other way. This is very like when we have a swing. If we have a swing, at some time it goes this way, which is, say, represents the economy being a little bit sluggish. There are then forces that begin to heat the economy up so that it begins to swing back to a neutral position. But by then, a lot of things have got into it that are pushing it in this direction, so it continues to go to a point where it's now a bit overcooked. At that stage, it gradually gets arrested, that momentum, and there's forces that bring it back again. But again, it gets too much momentum, goes back. So like a swing, it goes past the middle position, and it keeps on going backs and forwards like this. Now, what is the action that economists take? When we're in this position of being a bit sluggish, they say we've got to push the economy this way. We've got to give it a push and get it to be a little bit more heated up. So they give push, push, push. Now, what actually happens, if we've got a swing going like this, how do you make a swing go higher and in each direction? The answer is you give it a push there, it pushes it further this way. You give it a push there, it goes further this way. And this is what economists do. They constantly give governments advice to push things towards the middle, push it back towards the middle every time it gets to extreme. These are the very actions that cause it to go to the other extreme. So the economy already has in place the things that are going to cause it to pick up again. By doing much more action and spending trillions of dollars on trying to make the economy get more heated up, the result is this. Instead of going back to there, it's going to go back to there. And the result of being back there is they're going to say, this is far too overcooked, we've got to push it back, and we're going to get it go back to there. So we're now going to get another big dip in about 4 years' time, 4 or 5 years' time, something like that. So the action of economists don't recognise one thing about the economic cycles. They don't recognise momentum. The momentum is there. As this thing picks up, it's got the momentum to carry it through already. If you want to make a swing go slower, when it's there, you don't push it hard that way. You actually stop it from coming this way. You push it back. you try to hold it back because it's going to get a bit overcooked anyway. When it's coming down, you try to pick it up again before it gets too far, and this way you can slow the cycles down and run a steady economy, which is good for everybody, not going to the extremes. A little while back, I came across the blog of the economics professor at Harvard, and he answered questions from the public on various economic issues. And someone had asked him, why don't we have some sort of a safety net in place to stop these economic crises? And he said, his answer was, well, yes, that would be very nice, except we don't know when they're going to happen. And he gave the standard economic answer, which is that the markets are where they are because it's a balanced view of all the people, all the financial institutions have taken all the knowledge that's available into account, and as a result they've reached a balanced view, and there's no one can say better than that. Now, I beg to differ with that, and so I wrote an email to him, and in it I said, here's a graph that I found a few years ago on the internet, and it's a graph of the US property prices divided by the Consumer Price Index. So what it's telling you is how expensive are properties right now relative to everything else. We've removed all the inflationary elements of the general prices. And this graph ran from the 1800s through to after 2000. And what it showed was that most of the time the price index of properties relative to other things was between 90 and 110, averaging 100 and oscillating up and down just in that range. There were two periods when it did something different to that. One period was for a period around the Depression, where it went a little bit lower than that and oscillated a bit lower level, then it came back up to that other level and continued at that for some time. And then, going from a low that was below 100 in 1997, it then went up, and it just went up into the stratosphere over the next about 4 or 5 years. And it reached a level of 200. In other words, at that time, in the early 2000s, the prices, the housing prices in the US were double the historical average, and almost double what they'd ever been before, relative to the prices of other things. So it was exceptional circumstances. Now, there were two things. There was this one thing of this going to the stratosphere on this one occasion. The other thing was there was a fairly regular cycle running through the data of 11 years. Now, that cycle meant that there was a correction happening in those prices. Every so often it was returning. It so happens 11 years is the sunspot cycle, and it's actually known that people do get a little bit more agitated every 11 years. For example, there are more wars every 11 years. I deal with this in some other of my talks. But anyway, what it meant was that because the last dip was in 1997, and we'd just gone up for about 5 years, I was able to predict at that time, and did so on my blog before the financial crisis happened, say that at 2008 we were due for the next low. You can say it was plus or minus a year or so because the thing wasn't perfectly regular, but it was fairly regular. So we had prices, not only were the prices at a level of 200, but I found out subsequently that the lending institutions were offering people 105 or 110% mortgages. In other words, you want to buy a house that cost 400,000. No, take 440,000. Go and have a holiday as well. Now, that would be a mad thing at the best of times. But when prices are twice as high as they normally are, what it means is you're now giving them 220% of the true value of the underlying value of a house. In sane times, institutions will lend 50% or 60 or 2/3 or 75% of the price of a house in a mortgage. Nothing like 100%, and certainly not more. So I don't think it's correct to say that these are market forces and that this is some sort of balanced view of people that know what they're doing. Anyone who lends 110% mortgages when house prices are 100% higher than they've ever been before relative to other things clearly doesn't know what's going on and is behaving in a silly way. The reply I got from the Economist was this: thanks for your views. He wasn't going to debate it with me. I don't think it's possible to debate it. I don't think there's any defence of what people were doing. I don't think that that the conventional economic wisdom is wisdom at all, and I don't think that those people know what they're doing.